Imagine for a moment the fire burning inside an ordinary man, transforming him into an eternal symbol of freedom. Picture living under a regime that suffocates every breath, where your choices, your land. Wallace wasn't born into royalty or great power. He was the second son of a minor landowner, part of a world where loyalty, honor, and faith meant everything. Historian Andrew Fisher and William Wallace reminds us that Wallace's early life was shaped by the brutality of his times. The memory of the Scottish throne left empty after King Alexander III's death in 1286. But farmers, shepherds, and blacksmiths, men whose only common trait was a shared longing to live free. Outnumbered and underestimated by a professional English army, Wallace and Andrew Moray, another Scottish leader, turned the landscape itself into a weapon. English forces, forced to cross a narrow bridge over the River Forth, were cut down mercilessly by Wallace's men. It was a triumph that roared through Scotland, a victory that said, "We are not beaten." His trial at Westminster was little more than a cruel performance. The sentence had been written long before. Accused of treason, Wallace spoke words that still ring across time. "I could not be a traitor, for I was never Edward's subject." Bruce's early years were marked by caution, even submission to Edward. In forests, betrayed by allies, his family imprisoned or executed. Wallace could be uncompromising. Bruce could be politically calculating. Today at the National Wallace Monument in Stirling, visitors don't merely see an ancient hero. They see a question. What would you do when freedom is threatened? In every age, that question remains. But both understood a truth as old as war itself. Freedom demands sacrifice, and no victory comes without cost. Michael Brown reminds us that the line between myth and memory often matters less than the power they hold to inspire. It's born in the hearts of ordinary people who choose to resist, even when resistance seems hopeless. Wallace's life teaches that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. His death proves that though tyrants can break a man's body, they can never destroy an idea carried by millions. And Wallace inspires not because he was perfect, but because he was human, angry, wounded, afraid, yet unwilling to bow. Their stories together tell of a nation's journey, from division and despair to unity and hope. Yet Bruce endured, driven by the same stubborn belief that had once set Wallace on his path. Yet he chose defiance over submission, words of truth over words that might have spared him. That moment, more than any sword swung in battle, forged his immortality. Medieval Europe. Then, in 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, Bruce led a vastly outnumbered Scottish force to a stunning victory. GWS. Barrow writes that Bannockburn was the moment Wallace's vision was fulfilled. A free Scotland, no longer ruled by English kings. It was not only a military victory, but a triumph of will over fear. But Wallace's sacrifice changed something deep within him. In 1306, Bruce crowned himself King of Scots, beginning a brutal new chapter in the fight for independence. Subscribe to Vertex of Time now, activate the bell, and join us as we uncover more forgotten heroes, lost battles, and hidden truths that shaped our world. By subscribing, you help ensure these stories live on, to inspire, challenge, and remind us that history is never truly past. It lives wherever courage endures. Click now and carry the flame forward. Fiona Watson in Under the Hammer. Edward I in Scotland. Notes that Bruce's final break with England was both political and profoundly emotional. The realization that half measures would never bring freedom. Peter Traquair describes this moment as the heart of Wallace's legend, a final act of defiance, even in chains. Fisher describes this as not merely a military success, but a national awakening, proof that courage and cunning could defeat even the mightiest empire. His head was set on London Bridge, his limbs scattered to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth, each piece a message carved in flesh. But if Edward I hoped to erase Wallace from Scotland's story, he failed completely. Michael Brown, in The Wars of Scotland, 1214 to 1371, explains that Wallace's martyrdom became a flame, burning brighter after death than in life. They were poorly armed, but they carried something far stronger than steel: belief. Chris Brown, in William Wallace, The True Story of Braveheart, highlights how Wallace's leadership wasn't born of birthright, but from a rare ability to ignite hope in those who had long forgotten what hope felt like. With every raid against English garrisons, Wallace's legend grew, the myth of an outlaw striking blows for the voiceless, and the looming shadow of England's King Edward I, a man known to history as the Hammer of the Scots. Wallace grew up with the taste of injustice on his tongue, each act of English dominance carving deeper into his young heart the belief that no man should live under another's boot. But hope can be fragile, and power attracts betrayal. Some accounts suggest he traveled to France, perhaps even to Rome, seeking allies and support. Peter Traqua, in Freedom's Sword, writes of this period as one shrouded in rumor and legend. While Wallace himself disappeared from the front lines, his name never vanished from Scotland's hearths and hills. Mothers whispered his name to their children. Bards sang of his courage by firelight. In the Wallace, the epic poem by Blind Harry, written in the 15th century, Maine became myth, an unbreakable spirit fighting not for power, but for the soul of a nation. When 1298 Edward I personally led a massive force north to crush the rebellion. At the Battle of Falkirk, Wallace's spearmen faced the full fury of English knights and longbowmen. G.W.S. Barrow, in Robert Bruce and the Community of the Realm of Scotland, notes that betrayal by some Scottish nobles, driven by fear or ambition, broke the defensive lines. The defeat at Falkirk was crushing, but even then Wallace did not surrender. Instead, he resigned as guardian, believing the cause was larger than any one man. And even your thoughts belong to a distant king who has never set foot on your soil. And now imagine someone who dares to say no. This isn't merely a story of war or rebellion. It's a story of love, loss, passion, and sacrifice, the story of William Wallace, the man whose name still echoes across centuries as a reminder that freedom is never granted, but painfully won through blood, courage, and hope. Today, we travel back over 700 years to discover why his legend refuses to fade, and why his life still speaks to us, even now. William Wallace was born around 1270 in the rugged heart of medieval Scotland, a land of green hills and ancient clans locked in endless conflict. But Wallace's journey wasn't driven solely by politics or kings. It was deeply personal. In his youth, Wallace found love with Marion Bradefute, a woman whose death at the hands of English soldiers became the spark that turned a grieving man into a revolutionary. James Mackay, in William Wallace, Braveheart, writes of this pivotal moment. Grief transformed into a burning resolve that could not be contained. Wallace realized that revenge alone would never be enough. The true battle was for something larger, the freedom of an entire people. As word of his defiance spread, Wallace gathered around him not knights in shining armor. The defining moment came in September 1297, the Battle of Stirling Bridge. After Stirling, Wallace was named Guardian of Scotland, not by royal decree, but by the voice of a people desperate for hope. After stepping down, Wallace's trail grows faint, but never cold. Then, in 1305, betrayal returned. Captured near Glasgow by John de Menteith, a fellow Scot turned agent of Edward, Wallace was brought in chains to London. The execution that followed was monstrous. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. A method reserved for those deemed the worst enemies of the crown. And that flame soon found a new bearer. King Robert the Bruce. Bruce's path was anything but easy. For years he was an outlaw like Wallace, hunted across moors. Wallace and Bruce shared flaws as well as greatness. And yet, Wallace's story endures not just because of battles won or lost, but because it speaks to something universal. Modern retellings, from the epic poem The Wallace to the film Braveheart, keep his legend alive, sometimes blurring fact and myth, but always capturing the essence of his stand. Perhaps what makes his legacy timeless is this: true heroism, ES&T, reserved for kings or saints. Imagine Wallace, standing in the cold before his executioner, knowing what awaited him. If this story stirred something inside you, if your heart beat faster hearing how Wallace dared to stand against an empire, Dan T let that fire die here.